This is Sarah Mikesell with Pigsite. Today we're speaking with Dr. Tom Delfonso. He is the worldwide director of animal nutrition at the U.S. Soybean Export Council. Thanks for being with us today, Tom.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks so much again for your time. So today we're going to talk a little bit about functional compounds. And we'll start with kind of a little bit bigger picture, right? Respiratory disease and heat stress are known to disrupt pig growth and feed efficiency. How do the functional compounds naturally found in U.S. soy help pigs maintain performance during these challenging periods?
Right. Let me talk about one biological response that really plays a big role in this discussion, and that is inflammation. Inflammation is the body's first response to a challenge, whether it's an infection, an injury, dietary changes can cause inflammation. And what we're seeing is that during respiratory disease, there is inflammation, there's other symptoms that occur, and there are a number of functional compounds in soybean meal that are affecting positively and alleviating the symptoms of respiratory disease when it happens, and some of the carryover effects of what happens later in the pig's productive life who experienced respiratory disease, let's say earlier in the year. So let's say in the wintertime, the pigs get a respiratory challenge. It's more common during that time of year than,
Mhm.
than, than other times of year. What we've seen is that increasing inclusion levels of soybean meal helps to alleviate a number of those symptoms. Then what we see in the summer during periods of heat stress, those animals that were affected by respiratory ailments and whose symptoms were not alleviated continue to have performance issues and seem to be affected more by what's called the summer dip. When it gets hot, there's a dip in
Right.
consumption, a dip in growth rate, um, and the number of different approaches to recover performance may include medications, it could include bioactive ingredients, it could include synthetic amino acids. You really want, when feed consumption is down, to still make sure that the animal's getting the calories and the essential amino acids and other nutrients that are needed, and that's a real challenge when feed consumption is depressed. It was only by increasing levels of soybean meal that we were able to recover or see that the pigs recovered performance during periods of heat stress. We couldn't do it. It wasn't demonstrated with synthetic amino acids or the other compounds in these experiments.
Very good. And tell us about research with pigs fed higher soybean meal diets during respiratory disease. Bioactive compounds fit into that research.
Right. Well, to understand that, it's good to sort of step back and look at, what are the core pillars as to how a pig immune system responds to things like stress and pathogens. And I mentioned inflammation as being number one, but
Right.
there's a whole series of things like macrophage activity, immunoglobulin synthesis, T cell signaling that also play roles. And these compounds of interest all play roles in each of these responses. So isoflavones play a role in reducing inflammation, in immune modulation, in macrophage activity. And they're antiviral and antimicrobial, so they may directly act. Other compounds like saponins disrupt the cell membranes of bacteria. Um, Bioactive peptides play a role in both uh, immunoglobulin synthesis, if they play roles in antimicrobial modes of action. So these very interesting compounds are all acting on all those different mechanisms that an animal has to respond to a challenge.
So that takes us through kind of the reaction for respiratory disease. Now let's talk about more specifically about summer heat stress. And you alluded to the summer dip, right? Which can equal up to 12 pounds per pig. at least here in the United States. I think that's the data that we've seen. How do some of these components that you've talked about, like isoflavins, saponins, and other bioactive compounds in U.S. soy, help producers mitigate those seasonal losses?
Right. I'd like to say we fully understand this, but
Right,
we understand that certain modes of action are complementary. They work together to affect an animal's health response. So let's go back again to before the heat stress and the respiratory challenges. So that puts a strain on the animal's energy needs. Energy is required for an immune response. Um, Challenges can affect the gastrointestinal tract, so that makes digestion less efficient for the rest of the animal's production period. Um, Things like uniformity of the herd get affected because not all animals are affected or infected
right.
with pathogens. And so what you see is an increase in the variability of body weight size. So all this happens, let's say, when there's a respiratory challenge and having high inclusion levels like 20, 25, even 30% in some cases of soybean meal alleviate those symptoms and make the animals and the entire population more resilient to heat stress. Now, in the case of heat stress, that summer dip,
So, Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt. So what happens with respiratory disease is right? It is impacting later on, right? I mean, it's all connected, in other words, right? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, no, this is complex and deserves a couple more Passovers for sure.
right, it's a
So
building effect almost, right? It's a build on, it feels like.
it it is a build on. It is a build on. So when you look at let's say digestion implies that the ingredients are highly digestible, but it also has to do with the animal's ability to digest. And an
Right,
animal's ability to digest is very much dependent on the state of health of the gastrointestinal system.
right.
So there's that relationship. That it's also related to the animal's ability to respond to challenges and the immune system response and the
Hmm.
efficiency of that response. And that requires nutrients and good management and environment also. So now coming back to the summer dip, we all know when it's hot out, we don't like to eat
Yeah,
as much, neither do pigs.
right,
So so getting the nutrients into the animal is the challenge. But what research has shown is that simply balancing the amino acid intake and the calorie intake isn't doing it. That doing so with synthetic amino acids and bioactives, etc., did not recover performance, but doing it with soybean meal did.
Hmm.
And so a couple of things are going on here. One, the quality of the essential amino acids and calories in soybean meal is superior. It's ideal for the animal. It's well balanced. Um, and the other is there are these functional compounds that are working together to help the animal's immune response, and immunity and digestion are closely related. And this is some of the most exciting new research, and honestly, being done by people smarter than me in this field. So that work is really quite fascinating.
Very good. And I was just at Lehman Swine Conference, and there were people really starting to talk about this. There were a couple presentations, and one of the messages they had, you and I have mentioned this, is there's still so much to do, right? There's so much to learn in this area that's going to be critical to producers really understanding all of this, not just researchers, but the whole industry learning about it. So
The,
we'll move
the
on
whole
from,
industry,
yeah.
but also, sorry to interrupt, the whole industry, but also human health and
Right.
nutrition has made a lot of progress in this regard, and the understanding of the role of isoflavones and bioactive peptides on the immune systems of humans and digestive health of humans really points to a consensus that it is these compounds that are acting in humans and pigs to produce these results.
Right. When I see posters at my chiropractor's office about leaky gut, I know There's a the world is coming together, right? Because we've
That
talked
is a
about that
thing.
kind
That is
of,
correct.
yeah, we've talked about that in livestock production for years now, right? And now
Absolutely.
it's becoming a common term, I feel like, in human health, kind of like what you were talking about. All these things are connected. So, and that gut health is so important. So we'll move on from there. But how should nutritionists and producers rethink formulation strategies to capture both the performance and health benefits of these bioactive components during critical stress windows? And there are several.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So first of all, I think we need to move beyond least cost diets that meet the animal requirements. Because what we're seeing is that there are minimum levels of important ingredients like high quality soybean meal that should be in the diet. So if you're formulating a diet, you should say minimum soybean meal 25% during some periods of time. And look at the economic consequences of not doing so. So not doing so, you're going to have less uniformity, you're going to have more mortality, you're going to have poor feed conversion, poor rate of growth, poor consumption, and all those are costs that are presently not included in a least cost feed formula.
Right.
So this new way of thinking about formulating diets based on animal performance, along with least cost meeting the nutritional requirements, is really the new way of managing nutrition.
And just to wrap up, Tom, for producers and nutritionists listening today who are rethinking their protein strategy, what's the single most important takeaway? We've covered a lot today, but what's the most important thing for them to walk away from this with?
We've talked about some exciting things, the functional compounds, the essential amino acids, the metabolizable energy, the role of the animal, the ingredient, and the immune system working together. I don't think I mentioned crude protein a single time in our conversation.
Right.
And you know what? The strategy for managing protein is honestly to forget about crude protein. It's a red herring. We nutritionists have been formulating diets on essential amino acids and digestibility and metabolizable energy for many years now. And the fact is, we don't actually measure crude protein in the industry. We use methods like Keldol and Dumas and combustion that measure nitrogen. And what we're finding is there's not a good
Mhm.
direct relationship between the amount of nitrogen and an essential amino acid and its digestibility and its consistency in the diet. So the first would be move away from crude protein and move to formulating on digestible essential amino acids and metabolizable energy. Take into account the consistency of the ingredients. Soybean meal made from US soy is highly consistent, so there's a big advantage there. You'll save money on feed formulation by getting those numbers correct. But then the next step is fixing in the diet minimum inclusion levels of soybean meal. Follow the recommendations of the research that has been published called the soy effect, um, and take into account the benefits of better animal performance when putting together a nutrition program, protein included.
Very good. Thank you so much for all the time, your time today, Tom, and all the information. We covered a lot of ground.
We did, Sarah, and I enjoyed the conversation too. Thank you.
Very good. This information is partially funded by the Soy Checkoff. This is Sarah Mikesell with the Pig Site.